will be calling upon and introducing our special guests at various points of the presentation, so thank you again. And I'll turn it over to Tabby at this time to get us started.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much again all for you joining. I'm really excited to jump into this and talk more about EV charging station installation. I know that EVs are such a huge part of the conversation, so really excited to be focusing on that today. So just to kind of start us off, I wanted to, just set a foundation. Why are we talking about electric vehicles and why are they such an important part of Hawaii's clean transportation future? So first of all, we know that Hawaii is transitioning to a clean energy future. In 2014, Hawaii committed to having 100% renewable energy by 2045. And about 3 years later, all 4 of Hawaii's mayors committed to 100% clean ground transportation by 2045. So this is a very lofty goal and a very important goal. It'll help Hawaii to combat climate change and reduce our environmental impact, but will also help us to, improve our air quality, improve public health, and also, just kind of generally improve Hawaii's quality of life. So it's really exciting that we've made these commitments, and 2045 is going to be a big year and it's coming up really fast. So we definitely need to make sure that we prepare. So we all know that electric vehicles are a huge part of the clean transportation conversation. One of the main benefits of electric vehicles is that they are more sustainable than the gas-powered vehicles because they have no tailpipe emissions, they have reduced air pollutants, and they also emit less carbon dioxide emissions. And they even have a smaller carbon footprint when you're comparing electric vehicles to gas-powered vehicles. Even if you consider like its production, its life cycle, and even its end of life, they're still more sustainable and have less of a carbon footprint than your gas-powered cars. And something to keep in mind is that as we get closer to 2045, our electricity is going to become cleaner and our electric vehicles are going to become even more sustainable and even cleaner. So that's really the main benefit of electric vehicles. There's also some additional benefits. Switching to electric can help us save money. There's lower maintenance costs because there's less moving parts on the EV, and electricity is cheaper than gas or diesel, and this is the case all across the country. EVs are also very fun. If you've had the opportunity to drive one, they're very quiet, and because they have an electric motor, they have instant torque and can accelerate really fast. So it's also very fun to drive, not just, environmentally and economically friendly. So we're not, a big part of the reason why we're anticipating a huge growth in electric vehicles is because of the commitments that Hawaii has made. But we're also seeing this transition over to electric vehicles happening in the market, both locally and globally. Globally, it took us 18 years to sell the first 1 million vehicles and only 18 months to sell the next 1 million. And then between 2020 and 2021, the number of electric vehicle sales doubled from 3 million to 6 million. So we're seeing this exponential growth happen in the market, and we can really anticipate this to happen and to continue into the future. And we're seeing a very similar trend here in Hawaii as well. It took us like over a decade to hit the first 10,000 electric vehicles, and it took us only 3 years to double that number. And with this expansion of electric vehicles and increased adoption, we can also anticipate there's going to be a huge need for charging stations to support this shift. So the International Energy Agency expects the number of charging stations to grow between 800,000 and 1.7 million by the end of the decade, which is 2030. That's in 7 years. It's coming up quick. And so it'll be really important that we do what we can to expand our public EV charging infrastructure to make sure that we can support this transition. And it's also a really great opportunity for us to capitalize on this.
So for this slide, we wanted to give you guys a bit of an idea about what the investment into EVs would look like, both upfront and long-term. So, for many years, EVs were and are still seen as kind of an exclusive car. They're typically the upfront costs were more expensive than comparable sedans, but now we're seeing these costs becoming more and more comparable. So the data that I pulled for this slide comes from the Department of Energy Alternative Fuels Data Center. And just a quick disclaimer that the prices of these vehicles up front may be a bit higher for Kauai dealerships. We know we love those shipping costs, But yeah, basically just wanted to pull down a few of the more affordable EVs that we see on the market right now, and then compare those to some sedans that you could see driving around as well. So for the graph on the right side, we see the cumulative cost of ownership by year. The red line is the Toyota Camry, blue is the Honda Accord, and the yellow is the Chevy Bolt EV. So as we see over time, the Chevy Bolt is actually like a bit more affordable over time than the other two cars. And back to Tabby's point, that points to the cheaper maintenance costs over time, just because, you know, the EVs have fewer parts, so they're cheaper to repair. And you know, there are dealerships that sell EVs, and just want to point out, used EVs will definitely be cheaper than those new ones. You can keep an eye on local dealers that sell them, as well as Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. And just wanted to add to Tabby's point from the last slide, you know, California made their commitment last year of not selling any more gas-powered cars by 2035. That will definitely have a big impact on the market, you know, because they sell the most vehicles in the country. So that should drive down costs, continue to drive down costs. Tabby, looks like you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Well, I wanted to thank you, Christina, for that slide, because I think it does a really good job at illustrating, you know, electric vehicle cost over time, and how even if there is that upfront cost, it does make sense in the long term. And I also just wanted to take a sec to address some of the concerns that people have about electric vehicles as they stand now. You know, the first, again, is that cost. Electric vehicles are more expensive than their regular gas counterparts. However, because, you know, the manufacturers and the market, they're all investing in electric vehicles, and the technology is going to improve and things like that, EVs are projected to actually reach price parity with gas-powered vehicles within this decade. As soon as like 2024 and 2026, EVs are the shorter range EVs between 150 and 200 miles are supposed to be about equivalent to your cheaper gas-powered vehicles. And then by 2030, 2032-ish, your longer range electric vehicles ranging from 350 to 400 mile range will also reach price parity. So while the cost of EVs right now are expensive, that cost is going to go down. And so they're going to become more accessible and affordable to more people. The second concern that people have about electric vehicles is that, you know, we're talking about them as a solution to help to reduce our environmental impact. But the critical mining for electric vehicle batteries has a lot of negative environmental impacts and social impacts from the production. So I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of initiatives to help bring battery production back to the US and hopefully expand regulations on it to make them a little bit more sustainable or a little bit more socially responsible. And there's also more and more investments happening to expand battery recycling so that we can reuse those critical minerals instead of having to constantly be mining for more. I'll mention that with batteries and just kind of with the technology, electric vehicles are still very new. Gas-powered vehicles, their production and everything like that, they're so efficient because they've been around for 100 years. And so, you know, we're noticing all of these kinks. The market and the auto manufacturers are noticing this. And so with time, electric vehicles, the technology will get better. It'll become more sustainable. And a lot of these concerns are going to be addressed. So yeah. With that, we know that electric vehicles are the future. So a big part of that is going to be electric vehicle charging. So very quickly, I'm kind of go over the EV charging station basics. So right now, Hawaii's public charging network, the demand of EVs is definitely outpacing the supply of chargers. The number of EV charging stations that we have, you'll get different numbers depending on where you look. But about an estimate is that we have about 350 stations and about 830 ports across the state. These are public stations specifically, which anyone who lives in an apartment or a condo or who doesn't own their home is really going to rely on public charging. And if we consider the fact that we have over 20,000 electric vehicles in the state, 350 is definitely, you know, not where it needs to be. And so there is a really huge need to expand our public charging network. This estimate here on Kauai is also a very low ball estimate. I think that there's a few more chargers, but you can see that they're kind of sparsely located across the island. And so there's definitely a huge opportunity to expand it specifically on Kauai, but definitely on all the islands as well. So just some basics. There are 3 types of EV charging levels. So the first is level 1. This is your slowest type of charger. This is something that you can plug into your regular 120 volt outlet. This is really good if you live in a house and have access to an outlet in your garage. It is your slowest form of charging. You get like 2 to 5 miles of range per hour of charging, but it is the most inexpensive. And if you do have access to a plug near your car, this is probably going to be the most convenient option. But for apartments or buildings or anything like that, that's typically not the case. And so then we go over to level 2 charging. Level 2 charging is the most common form of public charging. It requires about a 208 or a 240 volt outlet. It runs between 7 kilowatt to 19 kilowatt. It kind of depends on the charging station. And it gives you about 10 to 20 miles of range per charging hour. In order to install this, you definitely will need an electrician, but because they're built for public charging, typically, there is a mechanism for you to put in a payment option to charge for people to be able to use that station. The last and most fast level of charging is level 3, or better known as DC fast charging. This requires 480 volts. That's a lot of electricity, but as a result, you can charge your electric vehicle up to 80% or about 100% within 30 minutes to an hour. So it is the fastest, but because it requires so much electricity and so much hardware, it is definitely by far the most expensive type of charging station to install. You'll definitely need an electrician, but they are almost exclusively for public charging. So level 2 is probably going to be the way to go in terms of, what is required, what the cost is. This is probably the most accessible, and it's also just it's still really helpful and is really great and will be a really essential part of expanding our infrastructure. So now that you understand the different levels of EV charging stations, here are some things to consider once you actually decide to move forward with installing a public EVCS. So some benefits to keep in mind when you're considering EVCS installation on your property, whether you're an apartment or condo or a business or a workplace. Supporting EV drivers with an EVCS can help to showcase your commitment to public health and clean energy and sustainability. It can really help to communicate that message to your customers. And it can also help, if you are looking to get some sort of sustainability certificate for your business or for the building, that can help you get LEED certifications and other types of things like that. So that's a really good way to showcase your commitment. EVCS installation can also help to reduce fossil fuels and gas emissions in your area by supporting electric vehicles. And it can also increase the value of your property. It is, obviously an upfront cost to put an EVCS in, but we know that the market is headed in the way of electric vehicles. So within the next few years, people are going to be starting to look for apartments or businesses in their area or workplaces that offer EVCS. And so that's really going to increase the value of your property within the next few years. So that's definitely a huge benefit to consider. And if you're a business, EVCS installation can also attract a new market and more foot traffic because the EV owners, they have to spend more time to charge their vehicles in an area. They may be spending up to 3 times as long at your business than a non-EV driver. There's a lot of studies that show this, and it can also lead to more dollars spent at your business. So this is a really beneficial component of EVCS that I think is one of the main drivers and incentives for people to actually install. There's also some indirect benefits of installing EVCS, including helping to increase the number of EVs in your area and doing your part to help decarbonize our transportation. An employee with access to workplace charging is 6 times more likely than the average worker to drive electric. And you can translate this over to, residents of an apartment and different things like that. So you're really helping to support this transition. It can also help to mitigate the cost of climate change that we're all going to experience collectively. and can do your part to stimulate the local economy. You know, you're bringing in contractors that work locally. EVs will require mechanics that operate locally and different things like that. So you are also helping to stimulate our economy. So when you're looking for EVCS, there's two types of contracts or different ways to go with your EVCS to consider. So you can either lease or buy your EVCS. It's very similar to leasing or buying a car. Leasing will typically be cheaper and simpler. It means that you have less control over the unit, but that also means that you have to spend less time managing and operating the EVCS. And you must rely on the provider for maintenance. This can be, you know, a pro and a con. That means that you have someone that you can reliably rely on for maintenance. But if, you know, maybe the provider isn't always as consistent or they don't always have the capacity, that can also be your Achilles heel. So just something to consider when you're looking at those contracts. If you were to buy your EVCS, it is definitely more of an upfront investment, but it can be more cost effective in the long run. The only thing is that you are responsible for maintenance. It's not tied into whatever lease contract you have, which depending on how many issues your EVCS has, which is hopefully not too many, maybe that can drive up costs, but definitely I don't think should be too much of a deterrent. Something to consider too is you do have more control over your EVCS if you buy it. And so it might be easier to implement, you know, however you want to charge people to use your EVCS or funding mechanisms, whatever it may be. You have more autonomy when it comes to that. And then the last thing to consider as well is that historically, any sort of federal tax credits that have been offered for helping to offset the cost of EVCS, typically they will only allow people who buy their EVCS to qualify for the tax credits. I believe KIUC and Hawaii Energy's rebates, they don't discriminate between whether or not you lease versus buy, you'll still be eligible for the rebate. But this is just something to consider, you know, with more and more federal tax credits coming out, you may or may not be eligible if you decide to lease your EVCS. So these are just kind of like a high level overview of the two ways that you can go. The next thing is considering a warranty versus maintenance contract. You know, if you're going to invest in an EVCS, you want to make sure that it works. You know, your warranty contract will usually, you know, it's for a certain amount of time. It'll usually only cover items that break or malfunction. So it might be good to invest in a maintenance contract so that you have someone reliably for the future, just in case something were to ever happen with your EVCS. Because I know that sometimes it can take like months or even like a year before EVCS can be fixed again. So I think it's a really good investment to find a maintenance contract. What's it called? Maintenance contracts can also cover more than a warranty contract would. It's typically an additional charge, but I'd say that it's usually kind of a great insurance and is really worth it. So I would definitely consider that if you're going to invest in an EVCS.
On my side, I'll be discussing the difference between network and non-net chargers. Network charging stations can be found in an app to maximize the use of your charging station. You can compare and see your usages. It also has remote access capabilities. And when I talk about remote access capabilities, it's in case to troubleshoot, they can do it remotely compared to a non-network charger. The consumer also can use a credit card to make a payment for the use of their charger at their facility. If something goes wrong, like I said, troubleshooting can just be done online to see what's wrong with the charger. When we look at network, non-network charging stations, network chargers is cheaper than, non-network chargers are cheaper than network chargers. You cannot take payments with a charger that's non-network, so it'll be free. And then also troubleshooting might take longer than normal because it cannot be done through the network to do troubleshooting on those type of chargers.
So this slide is all about the cost of EV chargers up front and then some cost estimates for installation. So I just chose a few of the chargers that we currently see on island. And honestly, I chose these ones because I could actually find the cost for them online. But yeah, you'll see a slew of charger brands here. But basically, I've kind of divided it by the number of heads that they have, if they're networked, like what Kyle was just talking about, and then you can get a sense of the cost per charger and the cost per pedestal. So basically, as Kyle said, you'll find cheaper chargers if they're non-networked. So you can expect to pay anywhere between 400 to 8,000 for a level 2 charging station. Again, depending on if it's single head or dual head, depending on its specs and depending on the manufacturer. So for installation, we see it kind of varies, and this is really up to like what kind of quotes that you get from a contractor. It'll be dependent on, if you need to have power upgrades, how much trenching might be required, concrete needed to be filled. So it's going to definitely vary. The first bullet is an estimate from a local contractor for cost to install the infrastructure during the construction phase. So it could be anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 to put in all the wiring and everything, get the power upgrades going, and then you have your charger able to be installed from there. The other 2 bullet points are from shared experience from a few installs that happened on island, one in 2018 and one in 2022. And this was like the retrofit style. So, they had the building, it was existing and everything, and they installed the charger in the aftermath. So again, like I said, it's just going to vary between the contractors and stuff like that, but this can kind of give you a ballpark figure. So the next slide is about cost of charging vehicles themselves. So as Kyle mentioned, you can either go with a network charger or a non-network charger. With network chargers, they're kind of the smart chargers. So you are able to control sometimes like the power output for them. You can set time limits for when the charger is able to operate. And you can also use the charging company software to charge the public for parking. So, some commercial EV owners will choose to charge the public. Some will not. They might choose to use free parking for a certain period of time. And kind of like from what I've seen from PlugShare, most often it's been about 50 cents a kilowatt or $3 an hour for charging for the folks that are charging the public. And then the cost of charging itself, these things, if they're metered separately for level 2 chargers, they'll use Schedule T from KIUC. So it's about 36 cents a kilowatt, and that was as of May this year. And so Kauai EV, the group on island, they have a great electricity and fuel comparison calculator on their website. So I just took a screenshot of it. But basically, you can add the price per kilowatt and then add the price per gallon of gas at Costco or at any other station. And in the bottom of the chart, I have it highlighted in yellow, but basically a gas car would need to get 52 miles per gallon in order to be cheaper to run than an electric car. Again, this is at the current rate. So you can kind of see, not a lot of gas cars are 52 miles per gallon. So yeah, it can be cheaper to fuel your vehicle if you have an EV.
So to incentivize more charging stations, Hawaii Energy, that runs the state's funding for Hawaii, is actually offering a level 2 network single port for $1,300 on a retrofit. And if you have an existing charger, and $2,000 for new installation. On a level 2 multi-port charger also, they're offering $3,000 for a retrofit, $4,500 for new installation, and they're also offering and providing a rebate for fast DC chargers. And this is through Hawaii Energy. We at KIUC is offering $5,000 for a level 2 multi-port charger and $3,500 on a retrofit charger. The best part, what I like to call double dipping, is you could apply our rebate and Hawaii Energy rebate together. So for an example, on a new charger, you possibly could qualify for $9,500 to install a level 2 multi-port charger. Please go to the KIUC.coop website There's a tab called Member Services. You'll click on that tab. Then you'll click on Electric Vehicle EV Resources for more info. So we have the Hawaii Energy website up, and also our KICU website with the parameters and rules to qualify for these rebates.
Yeah, I'll also plug that Stephen from Hawaii Energy, who runs their rebate, is on the call as well. So if you have any questions, Stephen, I'm going to queue you up to please send him your questions in the chat as well. So yeah, thank you. I also wanted to mention some of the federal tax credits that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act last year. So with the new IRA and the new federal tax credits that are available, there is one for electric vehicle charging stations. I will mention that the requirements, there are a lot of requirements in order for you to be able to qualify, such as, the census tract can't be in an urban area, and, all the things that are listed on the bottom here. But I still think it's worthwhile for you to look into and to see if you're in a region that would qualify for this, because sometimes the census tracts and kind of what the federal government considers to be a certain area may be different than kind of what we think in our everyday. So you might be able to find a pocket, or, you might find that you do qualify, which would be really great. This tax credit can give you between 6 to 30% of the cost of your EVCS installation, not to exceed $100,000. $100,000 is a lot of money and can really help to, offset the cost of whatever you're installing. So we're going to send some follow-up information on this tax credit. It's not going to apply to everyone, but again, really, really would be great to look into to see if potentially you qualify, because it might surprise you. There's also another federal tax credit. I think this is more for at-home installations if you're like a homeowner. But again, I also recommend looking at the IRS website for more information, and we'll send some more follow-up information as well. But if you install a residential fueling station between this year and much further into the future, you may receive a tax credit of up to $1,000. So just also something to consider, and something that can also help to potentially offset the cost of your EVCS installation. So yeah, what are the next steps now that you kind of have an overview of what to think about and what to look for? This is just kind of a very, very broad, high level, overview of the steps. There's definitely a little bit more in between, but just to kind of give you guys an idea, your preliminary considerations, the things you'll want to think about, clarify the ownership of your property, who operates it, and how the revenue will work. You'll want to figure that out in advance. Obviously you'll want to know your budget. It'll be good to conduct a site evaluation with KIUC to get a sense of what will be required to install an EVCS and where would be the best place to install it to help to reduce your cost. And then also reaching out to local contractors and businesses to get quotes, see who would be able to install this for you. That's definitely the best first step that you can take. Next, you'll want to decide on your EV charging station. What type of charger do you want? What brand? What kind of contract? Are you going to invest in a maintenance contract, which I highly recommend? Do you want a networked or a non-networked charger? How are you going to charge people to use your EVCS? What are your charging policies going to be? Is it that, people can only charge there for 2 hours, or, these are things that you can figure out and decide on. And then you'll also want to select the site for the EVCS that'll, be the cheapest for you, but also the most accessible and most effective. The next step that you'll want to do is, once you have your contractor and once you know what you want to do with your EVCS, you'll need to submit permit applications and get approval. And then hopefully once you get approved, you'll be able to install your charging station and start promoting it to the community.
We at KIC, we actually do site assessments for free for our members. We also look at different options or obstacles to keep infrastructure costs low or to a minimum to install an EV charger. We also do load testing on your transformer to see if your transformer can handle an extra or an EV charging station. We'll give you guys our recommendations on where we think infrastructure should be, where your charger should be. But at the end of the day, it's all up to the owners and where they want to put it and what they want to pay for it. Before starting an EV process, I would recommend highly to give KIUC a call. You guys can ask for me, and then we'll assign that way and schedule. We try to keep your costs unhidden on the KIUC side of transformers upgrades or electrical or anything to that nature. So make sure you guys give us a call if you have any questions. Like I was saying earlier, we do have rebates to share with our members. And if you're unsure, you still can give me a call and we can actually go over the rebates with you. When we look at infrastructure cost on EV rebates, sorry, my screen just went blank. We're looking at on commercial properties. It says the owner will be responsible for the transformer, right? So when we look at a residential's owns after their meter. When you're looking at a commercial property, the owner is before the meter, after the transformer, right? So when we talk about transformers and we look at a load on an EV charger, for instance, if the transformer cannot handle the load of the EV charger, then the owner would be responsible for the replacement of the transformer for it. The other good thing about infrastructure for the future is as times go by, it's important to look at your property and look at the future, what's ahead of you of installing more chargers. Where are we going to do it? If it's the same location as your existing one that you just want to add more stations in that location, it's always better to do it ahead of time. Just for an example, you don't want to install one charger, you cut up all your roads, and then after you're going to fix it, repave it, and then later on, years later, you're back in the same location, cutting up your road again that you just put brand new. So it's always best to do your infrastructure ahead of time. So it's good to plan for the future.
So the permitting process through the county is pretty straightforward. Basically what you'll do is once you're ready to get going on the permitting, you'll pick up the application from the building division office at the Civic Center. And what you submit back to them is the plans that are stamped by a design professional, and then as well as the application. From the county's end, the supervising electrical inspector will do a plan review. And then basically when it's approved, the county issues that electrical permit to the contractor. I just talked with the building division this morning, and they said, you know, if everything looks good, they could probably turn around a permit application within a couple days. So that's pretty good, I'd say, timing wise. And then the one KIUC would come in is basically if there's existing electrical service is insufficient, the second permit for a new meter or a meter upgrade would be required with KIUC. So again, it's good to, you know, keep Kyle in the loop and stuff like that once you're going for these projects.
Thanks so much, Tabby, Christina, and Kyle. Next, we will invite Robin Shishido from HDOT to the conversation, and he's going to be talking about various initiatives to expand public EV charging stations in Hawaii. So take it away, Robin.
Hi, everybody. Again, Robin Shishido with the State Department of Transportation. Next slide, please. So as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was a National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that came about. And this program provides $2.5 billion to all the states nationwide through the Federal Highway Administration. So looking at that first part there, you know, Hawaii over the next 5 years will get $17.6 million from the program and requires 20% of our local match. So in total, there'll be about $22 million to put chargers all across the state. The whole intention of this plan, the program, was to put 500,000 chargers across the whole nation, you know, from going from East Coast to West Coast. Us being in Hawaii, you know, we're a little different with the program. Obviously, we're not going to be driving across states or anything like that, but we still have to meet the same requirements. You have to put 450 kilowatt chargers at each site, and it has to be spaced 50 miles or less along alternative fuel corridors. So besides the interstates on Oahu, on each island, there are some designated corridors. And for Kauai, it was a Kamuli Highway and Kohio Highway. And fortunately with those, it'll be one site that has 4 chargers that will be able to meet that requirement. And the purpose of meeting that requirement is once we fulfill what's required in the plan, then we can utilize the funds or any other funds to put different type of chargers across the state as well. So it doesn't have to be this fast DC chargers, because what we're finding out working with HECO and KIUC is that that's a lot of power draw, and it does require a lot of infrastructure upgrades. But to get started, we already have 32 NEVI compliant chargers on order. As I mentioned, nationwide with 500,000 chargers being installed, we want to get ahead. So we will probably be the first state to have these chargers on island and also maybe installed and operational by the end of the year. So first sites we're looking at is on Maui and Oahu, currently in design. And next we'll jump on to Kauai Island or Kauai and Hawaii Island. And preliminary sites working with KIUC is the Kauai Community College and the former Kauai Police Station building. But as we get more into the details, we'll reach out to all the stakeholders again and refine where those sites go. Next slide, please. So along with the NEVI program, there was grant programs that were also established, and this also provides $2.5 billion over the next 5 years. So there are two types of grants that are available. There's a community charging program and a corridor charging program. So with the community charging program, it's a little bit less stringent on the requirements for the chargers. You don't have to put that fast 450 kilowatt chargers. The corridor program, you still need to meet all those same requirements. With this, so focusing on the community program grants, it's a minimum award of $500,000 and up to 15 million. And right now in fiscal year 22 and 23, there's 350 million available in each year. And these grants also require a 20% local match. Next slide, please. So with this grant, there's multiple eligible projects that can be done. Generally it has to be at publicly located places, and it has to be publicly accessible. And I think it's 24 hours as well. So right now for this year's grant applications, they're due in a couple weeks. We're working with HECO and the Hawaii State Public Library Systems to put grants in various locations throughout the state. It's going to be on Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island. Right now I know on Kauai Island there's a lot going on, besides what we're going to be doing with NEVI plan. I know Christina has their earmarked, they're going to be charging stations. I know KIUC has some. So, next year, the years going forward, we'll look to partner with everybody and be able to bring in some of this grant money and increase our network throughout the state and island of Hawaii. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Now we're gonna welcome Araceli and Nikki, who both manage properties on Kauai with public EV charging stations, and they have had firsthand experiences with the process of installing and maintaining these charging stations. So we asked them to share with us some of their experiences. So thank you, Araceli and Nikki, both for being here. Could you please share with us your experience with installing level 2 EV chargers on Kauai, including some of the challenges you may have faced in with the installation and in getting them repaired? Maybe Araceli, we can start with you and then we can pass it over to Nikki.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Of course. We manage various commercial properties here on Kauai. We're currently working on our 4th EV charging installation. We started back in 2019 with some other properties. The challenge, I believe, that I can share is, the process that it required, as it involved various vendors. You have the electrical engineer initially designing the process, then you have the electrician, and then of course choosing the best charging station. My experience, particularly we used is ChargePoint. They do have good products. They offer good services as far as the being able to maintain it, following up on any repairs or anything that may be needed should we have anything that needs attention. The good thing for that community, we have seen it so far. We do get a lot of use of it. We get reports showing how much is being used. There is a charge for the use of the ones we have in place right now. The overall, it's not like you're really making money, but it is covering some of the expenses. So it is nice to see that. The process that it takes us, depending on the owner, particularly on how many proposals and so forth we need. I will say it's probably about 6 months from beginning to end. And other challenges that could come across is the distance between the electrical panels to where we're installing the charging station. So that could require a little bit more work and create additional expense. Some of to share a little bit of the ones we have installed here, the cost has gone overall. One was $43,000. The other one we're working on right now is about $15,000. And so practically the difference in cost is the type of charger. Charge point is more expensive. The second one we're installing right now is called Leviton. That one doesn't charge, it just provides the service for anyone in the community. And then the other ones do have additional features, and I think that's probably why they're more expensive. The cost itself for labor, just the last one we're working on, it's from the electrician, it's $4,000. The parts and the actual charging station, it's $6,700, and the electrical engineering services were about $2,600. And then the part that we're working on right now, it's the actual pedestal, building that up, which will be about $3,000. So that's just a little bit of the cost that we kind of have to consider. And then the services overall, I believe that they're great. One of them happens to be right outside my office, and I do get to see tenants and just other customers come in and charge their cars daily. So it is nice to see that. I think that's all. Happy for any questions.
Nikki, did you want to share something?
Yes. Hi, thanks for having me this morning. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to kind of just share with you folks some of the challenges that Colliers and our team collectively has experienced with managing and maintaining our EVs charging stations. So on Kauai, we manage the principal center. So up here we have 2 charging stations, not a name brand that's well known or that was shared earlier today, but we had it installed probably about 5+ years ago. Prior to Colliers actually taking over. So we've inherited it. And so we don't have a maintenance contract, and we didn't have a warranty on it. And so even if we had a warranty, it probably would have expired by now. And a lot of the challenges that we've had with it is because we don't have a maintenance program, or it's not a well-known brand. We've had to kind of go through different electricians to kind of figure out the best electrician to be able to work on fixing our charging stations. So kind of our lessons learned that we can share with you folks here today is, kind of similar to what Tabby and Kyle has kind of mentioned, is that, making sure that when you select a charging station for your property, is that you choose one that's that either you spend the extra money and kind of get the warranty, as well as get on the preventive maintenance program that they have. And also if you are able to, having that networked charging station would be a lot better than not having a non-network, just because you can have the company remote in and troubleshoot your charging station, because that's what we've been, the biggest challenge we have is just being able to have someone come and physically take a look at the unit and service and maintain it for us, or repair it for us as we need it. So that's the biggest challenge that we've had across the board, and even for properties that we manage on Oahu and Maui as well. The other thing that we know, and I kind of just want to share with the group too, is that finding the best location for your charging station. Not only it will be cost effective for you to be close to your electric panel, because that's where a lot of the cost comes in, right? Is how far do you have to run your electrical lines and conduits to install your electrical vehicles charging station, but also the location of where the sun sets, and if it's exposed to the elements. Is it in a covered area? We always want to make sure that it's in a covered area and it's out of the west facing sun, because that's where you get the most effects from the sun. Is if it's facing on the west side, it tends to, the material tends to deteriorate or get exposed more to the elements. And so you do face a lot more repairs and maintenance issues. So that's just another food tip or a tip for you folks as you guys are considering installing charging station. That's all I have.
So I would just like to say thank you to all of our presenters. That really does bring us to the conclusion of our presentation, but we're now entering our Q&A portion of our webinar. So if you'd like to ask any questions of our presenters, please feel free to use the chat feature, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. I know we were trying to respond directly to some of you folks who have already asked questions, but for the group that may not be paying attention to the chat, we can kind of repeat them for you. But just some of the questions that arose. The first question, is there a division of the government in Hawaii that helps to monitor the maintenance of charging stations? So if anyone would like to take that one.
This is Jim from Aloha Charge. I'm going to say the answer is no.
Yeah,
Not official.
I would have to agree with Jim on that one. I mean, I think it's something that they need to closely consider and work on. And I know it's been discussed in various circles about the maintenance of it. I think it's not a problem that is just experienced in Hawaii, but throughout the nation. I've read numerous articles and been a part of a bunch of webinars that have discussed this same issue. And that's something that we continue to look at and monitor and push for. I think it's been in discussions with various other groups as well about the maintenance of it. And I know it's a difficult thing to force upon these owners, but as we move towards electrification, that's something that really needs to be paid closer attention to. So for KIUC, does Schedule G have a demand charge? Kyle did answer that one in the chat, and that the Schedule G does not have a demand charge component. Question from the Hanalei Initiative. They currently have a private charging station for electric shuttles. They're planning on installing one for the public at the center in Hanalei. Could you cover which brands of equipment is preferred, or a review from others on their experience with certain networks or brands?
So I can kind of take that question there. Us at KIUC, we don't prefer any brands or anything. The way I look at charging stations is I look at it from the majority. What is majority on the island? And the reason for it is that's how you guys gonna get your networking on who's gonna repair these chargers. If it's like an off-brand, one-off, the chances of somebody coming to Kauai is pretty slim to none. They probably send you a charger and then you gotta go pay an electrician to install it. So look at the brands that you really see here on Kauai and go from there.
I would have to support Kyle's comment there. One of the things that we're seeing with the billions of dollars of funding that's coming into this industry is new entrants coming in every single day. And so do a little homework in terms of the history of the different providers out there. And I would just recommend you stay away from the ones that have been in business for about 3 weeks.
Thanks, Jim. So there was a question from Carolyn on the roadblock for properties who are located in SMA flood zone areas. And Christina is going to get back to you, Carolyn, on that one. She has to do a little bit more research on that. So the next question, how were the dollar amounts for EVCS rebates determined by KIUC? Does the PUC, county councils, or state legislature play a role in incentivizing additional funding for this program? When Kyle and I were tossing around the topic of EV charger rebates with senior leadership here at KIUC, it really came down to a bunch of different criteria. There was the budgetary concerns, of course, but there was also comparisons with like jurisdictions, the costs that we were seeing come through as estimates from other people. So, those were all the considerations that needed to take place. Does the PUC, county council, or state legislature play a role? Definitely. We do see incentives from various levels of government. So it never hurts to encourage your legislators to, participate and come out with their own incentives as well. Yeah. There was also questions from that people submitted prior, and I think maybe Kyle could address one. Does KIUC have plans for time of use charging? And is KIUC considering the use of load management to increase charger capacity? Kyle, you might be on mute.
As for right now, KIUC does not have any immediate plans at this time to offer time of use charging. But that doesn't mean KIUC will not consider it at a later rate as EV adoption increases. This would ultimately need to be vetted through our board and grant PUC approval as well. As far as load management, as EV adoption grows and more chargers are installed, KIUC will have to find ways to manage charging so that there are not any negative impacts that will cause grid instability on our side.
So Christina, maybe this question is for you, but I know you took us through the permitting process for EV chargers. Do you have any suggestions on ways to expedite the permitting process for EV charging installation?
I would say, just make sure you're talking to the folks in the building division throughout the process. If you have any questions, it's always good to submit plans that are correct. So yeah, and they're really great to talk with. So I would just say keep in communication with the folks involved, such as county and KIUC, just to make sure you have a successful application.
So before we go any further, I just wanted to do a quick time check with everyone. We're about at 10:56, just in case any of you folks have to run off to an 11 o'clock meeting or anything like that. But we will try to end on time today, but if there's any other questions, please note them in the chat. Some of the presenters are going to be available to remain on the line for a few more minutes. We'll just wait for additional questions. If anyone in the audience does have anything, you can also note them in the chat. So Tobias has written in, what's in it for nonprofits? Like what is the benefit for nonprofits to install EV charging stations at their locations? Tabby, did you want to take that one?
Yes, one sec, Tobias. I'm just reading your comment more closely. I guess it kind of depends on, what your nonprofit does, depending if it's like a service that is offered or, whatever it may be. Like some of the benefits that I mentioned earlier, there are definitely things that apply to nonprofits and can really be a really big part of it. But if you'd like, I'm happy to reach out. I'll definitely follow up with you and maybe we can talk more and see how we can continue that conversation.
And for Chala, the presentation recording, we will have that available upon request. So we'll make that note. And for everyone else, we will be sending out the slide deck as well as some additional resources and contact information following this webinar, more than likely by the end of the week. But if there's no other questions, I'd just like to again thank everyone, including our presenters and everyone participating. Thank you to the Blue Planet Foundation, Hawaii State Energy Office, County of Kauai, and KIUC. We truly hope that you gained some perspective from this webinar, and we look forward to working with everyone here on this call towards a clean energy and clean transportation future. Again, we will be following up this webinar with slides, additional resources, and contact information if you have any additional questions. So from all of us, thank you all for joining us, and please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.